Episode 1, W. The CES Letter, Unpacking the Mormon Panic, Why the Church Fears This Document and Its Impact. There's a document that has sent shockwaves through Mormonism. Not a lost scroll, not a rival gospel, but a simple PDF that's circulated online for over a decade. A letter so unsettling that it's caused crises of faith, disciplinary councils, and even excommunications. It's called the CES Letter, and for many Latter-day Saints it's become a litmus test between loyalty and inquiry, between faith and doubt. But why? What is this letter? And why has the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints responded with such palpable fear? Today, we unpack the CES Letter, the Mormon panic it triggered, and why the Church continues to treat it like radioactive scripture. Part 1. What is the CES Letter? In 2013, a man named Jeremy Runnels wrote a heartfelt letter to a CES director. That's a church educational system employee, after struggling with his own doubts. The letter was never meant to go viral, but once it hit the internet, it spread like wildfire. Why? Because Runnels had compiled in plain, accessible language many of the most troubling issues in LDS history, doctrine, and leadership. Topics like the Book of Abraham and the Papyri, anachronisms in the Book of Mormon, DNA and the Lamanites, multiple first vision accounts, Joseph Smith's polygamy and polyandry, the Kinderhook plates, changes to Revelations, and the Church's troubling history with race and priesthood. To those unfamiliar with these issues, the CES Letter is a jarring wake-up call. To lifelong members, it's like watching a dam burst, doctrine, history, and testimony swept away in one devastating flood of evidence. Part 2. The Church's reaction. So how did the Church respond? At first, it didn't. Silence. But as the letter gained momentum, defenders emerged, mostly unofficial ones. Organizations like FAIR, Book of Mormon Central, and apologists began publishing lengthy rebuttals. Leaders avoided directly naming the CES Letter, but their rhetoric started to shift. FAIR LDS apologist Scott Gordon wrote on FAIR, "The CES Letter is an attempt to create an alternate narrative for the truth claims of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints." I watched the early creation of the CES Letter in 2013, as the author scoured the internet, crowdsourcing other like-minded people to contribute questions that they would like to see answered. It has been published online and in book fashion and translated into Spanish, Portuguese, Swedish, Japanese, German, and they are working on Finnish and other languages. It has become a proselyting tool in attempts to draw people away from the Church, and it has been very successful. Apologist Sarah Allen stated in her FAIR article, "When I prayed about how best to start this series, I felt strongly that it should start by highlighting the manipulation techniques and dishonesty of the letter itself and of the letter's author, Jeremy Runnels. I'll dive into the content of the letter next week, but this week I wanted to lay some groundwork. If you understand that he misrepresented his story and told one thing to the public while saying something completely different to his friends on the Ex-Mormon subreddit, and that he specifically organized the letter to be as manipulative and overwhelming as possible, it helps you put the letter's questions and accusations in the proper context. Ironically, since the release of the CES Letter, the Church has done a complete 180 on its stance regarding the Book of Abraham. They've shifted from presenting it as a literal translation to claiming it was merely inspired, or alternatively, asserting that the actual scrolls Joseph Smith used for translation are missing. This isn't honest scholarship. It's a blatant case of the Church moving the goalposts to dodge critical scrutiny. We'll expose more of these evasions in the next section. Elder Ballard warned members to give Brother Joseph a break and avoid looking for answers on Google. Elder Corbridge labeled such material as Corihor's narrative. But there is a problem. Jeremy's statements in the CES Letter can all be verified. And then came the Church's most drastic response: discipline. Jeremy Runnels was disfellowshipped and eventually resigned after facing an excommunication council. Why? Not for spreading lies, but for causing doubt and refusing to stop asking questions. Let that sink in. Part 3. Why it hit so hard. So why did the CES Letter hit members so hard? Because it didn't just reveal disturbing facts, it exposed a pattern of deception, not from critics but from the Church itself. For generations, members were raised on a whitewashed narrative, a sinless Joseph, literal gold plates, a single, glorious first vision. Prophets who spoke for God without error. The Church of Jesus Christ as the one true path to salvation, uniquely guided by revelation. But the CES letter pulled back the curtain, chronologically, surgically, devastatingly. It began with Joseph Smith's early years, not as a prophet, but as a village mystic. Before any scripture translation, he was using a seer stone, claiming he could locate buried treasure by placing it in a hat and peering inside. He charged people money for these services. In 1826, Joseph was brought to court in Bainbridge, New York, for being a glass looker, essentially a con man using folk magic. Court records survive. The church now acknowledges the trial. But most members were never told. Then comes the first vision, the supposed foundational event of the Restoration. But it doesn't show up in writing until 1832, 12 years after it allegedly occurred. And that earliest version? No mention of two personages, just Jesus. No mention of religious confusion. Each retelling over the years changes key details: who appeared, when it happened, and why Joseph prayed in the first place. The version taught in Sunday school? It's the 1838 account, retrofitted to match a growing theological narrative. The result? Confusion, not clarity. Then came the Book of Mormon, said to be translated from gold plates by the gift and power of God. But not by looking at the plates. Joseph used that same seer stone, placed in a hat, while the covered plates sat untouched nearby. This detail was omitted from church art, lesson manuals, and conference talks for generations, only quietly acknowledged in recent years. Next came the Book of Abraham, canonized as scripture, said to be translated from Egyptian papyri, purchased in 1835. Joseph claimed it was the writings of Abraham himself. But when the papyri resurfaced in the 1960s, Egyptologists, including faithful Latter-day Saints, confirmed they were common Egyptian funerary texts from the 1st century BCE, filled with references to pagan gods, not Hebrew patriarchs. No mention of Abraham, no hidden meanings, no divine translation, just 19th century fiction sold as eternal truth. Then in 1843 came the infamous Kinderhook plates, forged brass plates created by local skeptics to trap Joseph. And it worked. He examined the hoax plates and declared they were authentic, even claiming to translate part of them. But they were etched with acid in a blacksmith's shop, a complete fraud. Yet Joseph fell for it, supposedly under divine guidance. Meanwhile, Joseph secretly married over 30 women, including other men's wives, teenage girls as young as 14, and women who were promised eternal exaltation for accepting his proposals. The church taught monogamy publicly, while Joseph practiced covert polygamy, lying to both Emma and the saints. Many of these marriages were never about raising seed, as apologists claim. There were no children, but they were sealed in secret, often with coercive promises tied to salvation. After Joseph's death, Brigham Young introduced what would become one of the most disturbing theological doctrines in church history: Adam God. He taught that Adam was not only the first man, but God the Father, the literal being who fathered Jesus. This wasn't speculation. It was preached in general conference and implemented in temple ceremonies. For decades now, quietly disavowed, without explanation. And then there's the priesthood and temple ban, a racist policy barring black members from sacred rites for over 125 years. Prophets taught it was God's will, that it traced back to a curse on Cain, that black spirits were less valiant in the pre-mortal life. These weren't cultural opinions. They were official doctrines taught repeatedly by men sustained as seers and revelators. Today, the church has disavowed the justifications, but not the practice itself. No apology, just revisionism. So no, the CES letter didn't destroy faith. It exposed how the church relentlessly edited its own history, selectively revealing only what would strengthen belief and hide its human origins. It didn't invent the problems, it compiled them using the church's own sources. And unlike dense apologetics, it was accessible, shareable, and devastatingly clear. It didn't hide behind nuance or footnotes. It spoke plainly. It gave voice to thousands of members who had quietly wrestled with these questions but never felt permission to say them out loud. The real crisis wasn't caused by anti-Mormon lies. It was caused by Mormon omissions. Because once members realized they weren't told the full story, they started to wonder what else had been left out. Proponents have falsely claimed that Jeremy Runnels admitted to lying about Joseph Smith using nearby place names in the Book of Mormon. These accusations are entirely untrue. Runnels has never retracted or confessed to dishonesty regarding this point. Jeremy Runnels has never claimed that he lied about Joseph Smith, making up Book of Mormon place names based on nearby locations. In the CES Letter, Runnels argues that several Book of Mormon place names closely resemble names of towns and locations near where Joseph Smith lived in New York, suggesting that Smith may have drawn on his local environment when composing the text. This claim has remained a consistent part of Runnels's broader critique and has never been retracted or labeled a lie by him. While critics and apologists, such as those at FAIR, have challenged the validity of this argument, pointing to issues like coincidental overlaps, post-dated town names, and selection bias, Runnels continues to stand by the claim as one of many evidentiary points questioning the Book of Mormon's authenticity. A simple Google search of each named town is all it takes to confirm that these places did in fact exist during Joseph Smith's lifetime when the Book of Mormon was written. The Church and its apologists aren't just mistaken, they are deliberately misleading you. This isn't a matter of interpretation. It's a calculated attempt to cover inconvenient facts with outright lies. Part 4. The Panic. The panic wasn't merely ideological, it was institutional and existential. Over the past decade, the Church has been rocked by waves of disaffection, rooted largely in demands for historical transparency, and the CES Letter has been the spark igniting that wildfire. In response, the Church rolled out its Gospel Topics essays, released quietly, cloaked in cautious language, and never once acknowledged in general conference. These essays reluctantly confirmed many of the disturbing truths Jeremy Runnels exposed, but dressed them up in softer, faith-affirming rhetoric. The strategy was clear: admit just enough to preserve a veneer of credibility, but never confront the full scale of the damage. Never offer a genuine apology, and never mention the CES Letter by name, because to name it is to give it power, because to engage it is to legitimize it, because they fear what happens when members begin to read it with open, unfiltered eyes. Part 5. The Bigger Question. The Church claims to stand for truth. Truth is knowledge of things as they are, Joseph Smith declared. But when truth threatens faith, does the Church still want it? Or does it silence it? Here's the reality. The CES Letter doesn't dictate what members should believe. It simply reveals what the Church has long concealed. It hands members the very puzzle pieces the Church buried and locked away, and lets them decide how to put the picture together. And that terrifies an institution built not on questioning, but on unquestioning obedience. As Jeremy Runnels put it plainly, I'm simply asking the questions I was told I could ask. So why does the Church fear the CES Letter? Because it's not just anti-Mormon, it's post-Mormon. Because it doesn't merely challenge doctrine, it shatters trust. Because once you've seen the truth, you can never unsee it. The toothpaste is out of the tube, and it's never going back. For those on this path, the CES Letter hits like a bombshell. But for many, it's also the spark of clarity, the dawn of freedom, the first step toward rebuilding something real, something honest. And maybe that's the real threat, not the facts themselves, but the freedom that follows. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and let's keep unpacking, because faith should never depend on fear. Thank you so kindly for watching. This is the Ex-Mormon Informant signing off for today.